I love South Park.
Look out!
There's nothing I could say about it that hasn't already been said.
I want to stick my balls inside your rectum, Kyle.
But there was always one episode that really stood out to me, because I really connected with its message. Season 5, Episode 6. Proper condom use. It's about sex education and the very, very poor standards we have for it here in the States. It is laughably bad. And while this episode does run wild with the concept, it's ultimately, unfortunately, not too far off from how it actually is. Just off the top, before I forget to say it, I received no sex education. Not from my school, not from my parents, nothing. And I get it, it's a really tough subject, especially if you're one who had a traumatic experience in the past. Any parents watching this video that haven't given their sons and daughters the talk? I don't blame you. Every parent trying to keep their child safe from the internet must feel like this. Sex is spiritual and emotional. And at the end of the video, we'll look at actual research done by real sex therapists to give a more comprehensive and grounded perspective on sex as a completely normal human function. But before we get to that, we need to talk about proper condom use. This episode does a fantastic job at hitting on one of the worst side effects of poor sex education. And it's more topical now than ever. Politically speaking, it's no secret that men are falling to the right more often and women are falling to the left more often. And they're falling fast. Before, there were some minor trends, sure, but now we've really fallen to the extremes. And I think that's what's really scary about this. Doesn't matter your politics, it really does not matter. But a giant divide like this poses a threat to just, in general, people getting along. It's a bigger gap than normal, and that's a bad thing. It makes sense why it's like this. There's a subset of people online that really like to sell stuff to young men. Specifically, they absolutely love to sell them the idea that society has failed them. And in some respects, I think they're absolutely correct. Surprise. But their solution to that problem is less than moral, to say the least. Oftentimes the solution is, oh, you gotta drink sparkling water? Like, sorry, but you need to go back to the kids' table. The adults are talking. All of this is culminating in the horrible effect of men and women being on completely opposite sides of the spectrum. More unstable relationships, more trauma, and more transactional relationships. Proper condom use shows us what happens when young men and women receive poor sex education. And sometimes you only get taught the physiological side of the equation. It's not always about the science. It's about the Mets, baby. Love the Mets. All right, baby, let's go. Get a home run. We live on a chaotic planet with complex social rules. And a more nuanced sex education program for our teens, I think, would honestly help a lot to make sense of all this. So, what exactly happens in this episode? The episode starts with Cartman excitedly running up to Stan and Kyle, saying he has something super cool to show them. He then proceeds to do the red rocket on a neighborhood dog. They're really impressed, so that night, Stan does it to his dog in front of his parents.
I'm the cool dad now.
Rightfully shocked, they come to the conclusion that the school hasn't taught them sex education. This is only after they struggle to explain to Stan the complex nature of what he was doing to the dog and why it was so inappropriate.
Well, you see, Stanley, your school should be teaching this stuff.
Yeah, let's get that damn school on the phone.
Here we have the first big commentary of the episode. In America, there's a huge divide between school-taught sex education and home-taught sex education. What I mean by school-taught is this. A teacher, or group of teachers, will sit their students down and teach them about intercourse. I say intercourse and not sex because the approach is typically more scientific. You put the thing in the thing and the thing comes out. Pretty straightforward. Except this is not true for every school. Sex education on a national level is handled by the state. This means that the sex ed you receive will vary wildly from state to state, or even from school to school. There's no real mandate for what sex education should be. Again, it varies all over the place. You know what I think of that?
Don't give me excuses! Give me results!
Some quick statistics. According to the National Conference of State Legislatures, NCLS, as of October 1st, 2020, 30 states require public schools to teach sex education, 28 of which mandate both sex ed and HIV education. 39 states require this HIV education overall, and only 22 states require that any of this be medically accurate. Yeah, it says it right here. I couldn't make this shit up if I tried. And this doesn't even consider private schools, one of which I attended. All of this is to say that sex ed taught at schools has no consistency. At home, your parents might sit you down and give you the talk. You know how it goes. The birds and the bees.
jazz?
Let me know if you have any questions. All that jazz. Or should I say, all that
Jane?
I'm obviously being facetious, but I appreciate how South Park touches on this part of the problem. In my opinion, sex ed should be taught in both of those places. Schools should give you the technical rundown, and they should communicate this with the parents so that they can sit them down that same night and finish the story with the emotional side. You know about how it's done, so here's why it's done. The emotional side, the spiritual side, no need to get specific. They'll learn all of that when or if they become sexually active. Because not everyone does, and it's important to recognize that. Continuing the story, the parents of South Park are all at a PTA meeting with the school. They're arguing over whether or not they move up the timetable for teaching sex ed, and whether it should be taught by the school at all. Principal Victoria mentions that the school's policy is to teach it in the 6th grade. This is actually pretty concurrent with my experience. I did mention earlier that I received no sex ed, but I did receive one scare tactics class about the dangers of STDs. At one point in the meeting, Chef states pretty clearly another wrench in this whole situation.
Look, Paris, do you really want your children learning about sex? Or the thought of being a kid is being naive? Let them be kids for a while.
And he's totally right. Kids don't need to know about all this stuff, especially kids as young as the kids in South Park. But there's a dilemma. As the world in general, and especially the US, becomes more and more connected and more capitalistic, we're starting to see sex everywhere. It's honestly ridiculous. Not even YouTube ads are safe anymore. Like, how does this shit go unmonitored? It breaks my brain and my heart, quite frankly. Kids shouldn't have to see this stuff, but they are, at an alarming pace, where their first exposure to the idea is becoming younger and younger. And no matter what side you're on, I think we could all agree that this is a really bad thing. It's a serious issue, so of course we're gonna try and fight it with better sex education. But we want kids to be innocent, so the question you're going to inevitably face is, do I want my child to be innocent, or do I want my child to be safe? I don't have an answer here, but it's something to think about. So they all decide that they need to teach sex education earlier. Mr. Mackey begins his lesson on sex ed with the 4th grade. And it goes about as well as you'd expect. They're laughing, he said the word penis, it's super funny. And this is one of the obstacles of teaching it in schools. Kids are gonna laugh at this stuff, there is no way around it. Sex jokes are pretty much the default when it comes to comedy. But Mr. Mackey snaps back at them for laughing. And I don't know about you, but it's really frustrating to me when teachers do this. Like Chef said, kids are gonna be kids. I know it's a serious topic and all, but I think in real life, the teens we're teaching this to would have an easier time opening up a dialogue about it if the teachers weren't so uptight. Lean into the fact that it can be funny, because it is.
How would you like to suck my balls, Mr. Garrison?
Just be self-aware about it a little bit. So he begins the lesson, and he doesn't even remember where the penis goes.
What the hell did I do with that damn thing?
It's one of my favorite line deliveries of the episode. It's pretty clear that Mr. Mackey hasn't had sex in a long time, yet he's the one teaching it. This is a pretty smart commentary on the hypocrisy of sex ed teachers. A lot of the so-called experts aren't really experts at all, because they're not sexually active. Mr. Mackey and Miss Chokes-on-Dick both don't have experience, yet they're the ones teaching it. For the boys, they have someone inexperienced trying to communicate with them how it all works. And in the next scene, the girls are taught by someone who does have the scientific knowledge base, but it's coming from Chokes-on-Dick, one of the most pessimistic characters in the show. Later on, it's revealed that Chokes-on-Dick has never had sex, and this aggressive fear tactics play from her starts to make a lot more sense. when someone gets this far into their life remaining a virgin, which there's nothing wrong with, they can become bitter, and they start discouraging the entire idea of sex as a way of coping for them still being a virgin. It's a byproduct of the world putting so much pressure on young women to be as physically attractive as possible and to be open to sex. In that same NCLS article from earlier, it's estimated that nearly 40% of high schoolers report that they were sexually active, with 8% reporting to have been with 4 or more partners. And when you really think about those statistics, they're probably pretty conservative, because what high schooler is going to actually want to admit to being sexually active? In reality, that 40% is probably much higher. I sincerely feel bad for any high schoolers watching who heard that statistic and now might feel inadequate. Trust me, there is no hurry. A lot of people can get in their own heads and become bitter about it, and you'll end up like these 2 teachers here. Jokes on Dick. That name makes me laugh every single fucking time. She tells the girls that they need to make the guys wear condoms. And I agree, you should use protection, especially if you're inexperienced. Very important. Obviously, there's comedy in telling this to kids as young as 4th graders, kids who really don't understand any of this and don't need to. But for the teens in real life, this is a hugely important detail. At lunch, the boys ask the girls what they learned in sex ed. Because of the out-of-pocket comment from Chokes on Dick about condoms, they immediately freak out and assume that boys need to wear them 24/7. But she forgot to tell them that they needed to have sex for that to be a problem. This starts the hilarious divide, almost war, between the boys and the girls.
Just walk away. You can put a stop to all this. Just walk away, and we will spare your lives. Just walk away.
And it's a pretty funny escalation that leads to the rest of the episode. One thing I love about this episode in particular is how none of the boys are in conflict with each other. Cartman isn't being a piece of shit like he usually is. I mean, he was the one that kind of started the whole Red Rocket thing, but the other boys didn't even blame him. In my opinion, the best and most enjoyable South Park episodes is when they're all on the same page, fighting some other group, because their dynamic feels more accurate to them being a group of kids standing up for each other. This leads to an absolutely knockout line from Stan.
Can I help you, boys?
Yeah, we need condoms.
The line delivery in this episode is just on another level. So they buy some condoms, and throughout the episode, they're using them to pee in and throw across the room. If this wasn't South Park, this would be really uncomfortable to watch. I mean, hell, even describing this to you right now is tough, seriously. This is the real setup for the episode, with the boys and the girls both left confused and against each other, and a couple of tense scenes between Mackie and Chokes on Dick that eventually lead to them doing it. Very graphic in typical South Park fashion. Hey, at least we're not staring at Randy's balls for half an hour. It all culminates in this very uncomfortable scene with Mr. Garrison teaching sex ed to the kindergartners. Yeah. Oh boy. I think all of this was intentionally uncomfortable though. It's hard to watch because it's stuff that is hard to talk about with young people. We really don't want to think about having to teach sex ed to people this young. And obviously, it's not as bad in reality as it's made out to be in the show, but it is a fact that the window of innocence is shrinking for a lot of kids, and we need to think of a solution. Not only is a lot of sex education taught too early or too late, but it's also genuinely misinformed. When Mr. Mackey and Chokes on Dick get together, they don't use protection, even though that's all they've been talking about throughout the episode. It's all one giant pile of hypocrisy. At the end of the episode, the boys believe that it's the girls that give them diseases, not the other way around. This sends them into an all-out war with the girls, creating a one-to-one representation of what's going on right now in the real world. Boys and girls are misunderstanding each other at an increasing rate, and we're headed towards a war of the sexes. Now, okay, it could be argued that I'm being dramatic, but let's leave the episode for a bit, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. So, full stop. Admittedly, you can't find an easy link between the two effects we're looking at here. When I started this script, I set out to find a link between poor sex education and the growing political divide between men and women, and I was not able to find any concrete evidence for this, but I still believe it's something we should look into, since this episode seems to think that there is one. Men often don't know how to communicate the idea of sex to young boys, and women tend to overscare the young girls. We pretty much know for a fact that when boys have poor sex education, they often handle it much worse. They forget to ask for verbal consent, they're bad at communicating what they want, and picking up on communications from their partner, and so often, you hear stories of guys only going after girls for sex. So now we've identified a link between sex education and, at the very least, men's behavior. So let's just focus on that for now. Also, I should mention I'm focusing a lot on heterosexual relationships in this video, and that's only because I can relate it to my personal experience. If I do another video like this, I could focus on homosexual relationships, but I would also bring in an outside source for that to voice their experience. So I don't want you to think that I'm forgetting about this entire other side of the conversation. I will likely make a video about that in the future. I just want to do it justice. I grew up Catholic, and the only time I ever heard about sex was from my religion teacher, who would read from a textbook about how to teach sex in the Catholic way, I think. I really want to give her the benefit of the doubt here. I was taught that sex was a necessary evil in the world, and that if you were a man and you wanted to have sex, you were committing a sin. Horny, a sin. Wet dream, a sin. I'm not exaggerating at all. This is literally what I was told verbatim. And it's what I genuinely believed up until college, where I started to unlearn all of these negative perceptions. When I got to college, there was still a lot of stereotypes about men in relationships just for the sex, which, I don't know about you, makes it hard to even try. And I don't think it wouldn't be accurate to say that men aren't really supposed to want it. At least the good guys just act like they're above it all and they don't care. And yeah, there's some goodwill in that. You shouldn't be in a relationship just for the sex. I think we can all agree on that. No matter who you are, men, women, non-binary, whoever, a relationship should be so much more than just the physical. And it definitely shouldn't be transactional. But sometimes I feel like we're going a little too far the other way, and we're forcing a lot of young men to bury that need for intimacy deep down, and it only comes out in unhealthy ways later. I said this in the last video, but no one is born a monster. If we have this problem with men only being in it for the sex, then we have to figure out who's teaching them to do that. Do you know how much better society would be if we could teach men how to actually communicate what they want and how to respond to their partners about what they want? I mean, we would all be on the same page here and not contributing to this huge divide. I don't think poor sex education is causing a political divide per se, but it's certainly not helping. Fixing it would help close the gender gap. So that's my experience and my opinion, but I need to back it up with facts. So, what should we be teaching young men and women about sex? Should we be teaching the physiological? Sure. But I think teaching the spiritual side of sex in the context of both partners is actually far more important. So, I've found the perfect article for this. For my videos, I've been using Psychology Today as a primary source. They are easily digestible reads written by professionals. Would highly recommend them if you want to dig deeper into this topic. This particular article, written by sex therapist Lori Watson, is actually pretty relatable and unbiased. It is a bit older, having been published in 2017, but I would say it's still mostly accurate to today's world. Fair warning, she does not hold back, and some of the things she writes could be controversial. Even still, I'd like to read some of this article to you straight out, because I think it's a pretty good summary of how most men feel. Over my career as a sex therapist, I have had the opportunity to sit down with thousands of men as they've discussed their sexual feelings, sex lives, and fantasies. Obviously, I don't know what it feels like to be a man, but I have had the honor of listening to the male perspective on sexual relationships. And while every man is different, of course, there are some common themes. Sex begins in the body. While women's desire for sex may be prompted by their mind, memory, or emotional feelings of connection, for men, desire is physical. Men have massive amounts of testosterone coursing through their bodies. Erections spring at the slightest provocation in young men. And for an adult man, seeing his wife or partner coming out of the shower naked causes his body to react. It is hard to overestimate the way his body chemistry directs his mind's psychology toward the sexual. And I think we can all relate to this on some level. For the guys, we've all been just trying to chill, just get some work done, and suddenly it strikes out of nowhere. Or you're in math class and you have to get up and present, and suddenly, god damn it, I've been betrayed. It just happens, and it's almost never on purpose. For men, sex is a hunger. Yes, he wants to be full, but his craving for sex is like a craving for chocolates. Every sexual episode holds the exquisite possibility of a surprise-filled confection. Maybe creamy, smooth, or buttery. Oh, okay. Maybe let's skip forward a bit. Sex is energy. Sexuality infuses a man's intimate relationships with potential and excitement. The hormonal energy gives him the drive and aggression to pursue his life's purpose and work, and to pursue his partner. He pushes through daily monotony, tantalized by the fantasy of a sexual reward at the end of a hard day. Sex is excitement. It's life's most thrilling adventure. His body is a great pleasure machine that he'd like to enjoy at full throttle. Since orgasm is usually reliable and easy, a variety of sexual acts, positions, and rhythms seem to be a fantastic way to explore and elevate his gratification. Every flirtation, smile, innuendo, shapely figure, or sexual image, whether fantasized or real, is a hit on the male brain. His brainwaves spike with elation just at the hint of something or someone reminding him of sex. Sex is the way he gives love. The moment his partner gets turned on is often the moment men describe as the most sexually satisfying. It's baffling to men when they are called selfish because of their preference for sexual connection. In their hearts, there's an expectation of mutual, exquisite bodily pleasure. He often concocts and fantasizes about how to make it better for her, begging for information about her erotic desires, just so he can improve as a lover. Sex is love. Sexual release makes men feel like they are finally home. After the world's hurts and challenges, sex embodies love and care and provides soothing and support. While he may be accused of only wanting sex, most men want and feel a much more emotional connection than a simple bodily release. Making love literally creates a deep feeling of attachment to his partner and spurs relational generosity, faith, and optimism. Being desired by his partner can be the single most reassuring part of his relationship. While most women may wish for an emotional connection before having a physical connection, for men, sexual connection is often necessary to feel safe enough for emotional vulnerability. Ultimately, male sexual drive in a relationship is a gift. It's another path towards love. And I really want you to listen to this next bit carefully. Men often approach women in a way that doesn't say, "I want you," as much as, "Do you want me?" Men are being careful, which is what they think they are supposed to do, but taken to extremes, this can be a turnoff for women. More like a little boy asking for permission than a man expressing his desire for them. That was a lot, and if you're still with us, props to you, but it probably did hit you pretty hard, and it may have been uncomfortable to sit through. I hope it was, because I find a lot of this information to be extremely accurate. It's hard to listen to, sure, but I think it's helpful. It's one of the shortest, most to-the-point, accurate articles I've ever read. But if there's one thing I don't understand, it's women.
I do struggle to comprehend emotions and feelings and women.
So, I found another article about women. Plus, I want this video to be about men and women. And I don't want to isolate one or the other from this conversation. So, to the women out there, I want to get both sides of the story. And to the men out there, you probably wanted to hear this from the beginning. Many women find sex to be the deepest form of love and connection, and many women are very sexually oriented. While his orgasm may be quicker, hers is often more powerful, and her incredible capacity for pleasure could include multiple orgasms. But the way that women experience and express their sexuality are often very different from their male partners. Here are some of the most common ways that women may differ from men. Sex is in the mind. Men are often disappointed that she doesn't crave it in her body as much as he does. But her body is very different hormonally. Testosterone does cause physiological desire in both genders, but to different degrees. Proportionately, the male hormonal drive is a loud scream, and hers is a whisper. For her, it's the fantasizing, remembering, and imagining hot sex that revs her engine. So, in times of infatuation or falling in love, when she is constantly thinking about being together, her sexual appetite is high and arousal is easy. Sex is about being desired. Sex researcher Meredith Chivers says, "Being desired is the orgasm for women." While seeing an attractive man might cause a small spike of excitement in a woman, some women are more visual than others. It's the thought of his reaction to her, "I wonder if he thinks I'm hot," that hits her brain like a lightning bolt. Knowing that her man is hungry for her engages her imagination and ignites sexy thoughts in the brain. Just as men often expect abundant sex after marriage, women have expectations of lots of continuing romance that assures her of her sexual desirability. Sex is a mixed bag. Most women do love sex, but desire can easily be derailed by tiredness, resentment, or the physiological problems of pain or menopause. In fact, without the physiological driver of testosterone, a main task for women is to turn off the inner brakes, says sex therapist Emily Nagoski. The distractibility of the laundry, children, and work, or the inhibiting voices inside that tell her no because of her history or religion. Women often come to bed willing to have a good experience, but not really wanting or craving sex until aroused. And sometimes getting to the peak of arousal can be a bumpy climb. For many women, it may take up to 45 minutes. Experiencing regular orgasms is not as easy for women as it is for men, but it is necessary for continued desire. So, while men love variety, women may prefer a tried-and-true position or routine because there is more guarantee of her pleasure, which allows her to relax in the moment. Sex is contextual. While many women do learn orgasm through self-stimulation, a large proportion begin their sexual lives with a relationship or hookup. The first time they are touched intimately might be by another person, whereas nearly all men start their sexual lives with masturbation. Feeling sexual desire is, at its core, the rawest form of vulnerability. To want our lover to touch us and bring us pleasure is to experience need. Often, relationship ups and downs cause women to withdraw desire and protect their heart in a way that men don't or can't, given their biological drive. Her need to feel emotionally safe before the sexual moment cannot be overstated. Romance and seduction are ways that both men and women can co-create a context for sex that helps her separate from the cares of the day and her mental checklist of things to do, and brings her to a place of vulnerability. Sex is an aspect of love. Sex, talking, hanging out, working together, managing a home and family as a team, feeling appreciated, celebrating holidays, giving and receiving gifts, and affection may all comprise love for a woman. Sex is just part of the whole, not the defining factor. Making love may flow from the warmth she feels in the relationship, but it's not necessarily the source of the heat. Sex is a way she gives love. I am absolutely not implying that women are obliged to give sex when they don't want to, but sometimes she may recognize her partner's need for sex and, despite her own lack of inclination, she may want to meet his need, in her mind. If there is relational warmth and goodwill, this offering can be a real gift of love. It can frustrate her efforts when her partner insists, "But I want you to want it," because he discounts her motive of love, insisting that sex drive should be the real impetus. But because she often feels desire after arousal, she often also finds herself glad that she started making love. Some women find deep satisfaction in sexual intercourse, even if it comes without her orgasm. While most of the time we want to feel like we're on the same page with our partner before having sex, sometimes it's having sex that gets us on that same page. So, that was a lot. But I think that last little blurb hit on the main issue here. Women tend to have lower sex drives that are in the mind and not biological like men's, which means for a lot of them, sex is something that's kind of an added bonus, right? And any women in the audience, you can tell me if I'm completely wrong. Like, I'm just reading this out to try and gain a better understanding. I really picked my sources carefully, but if you disagree, please let me know. All I want is to bring some common understanding here. For men, sex feels almost necessary to have that emotional connection. You could think about it like this. Men's biology forces us to put the cart before the horse, and it gets confused as the sole intention in our relationship. Men don't consciously enter relationships looking for sex. I mean, I know a lot of them do, but I feel like the real cause is biology forcing men to think that they need to have sex to have an emotional connection. And you may not agree with everything this author said, but do keep in mind she is a sex therapist who's talked with thousands of men and women over the course of her career. I want to trust that she knows what she's talking about. So, what should we take away from all of this? Honestly, I'll leave that up to you. I gave you a lot of information here today, and I'm sure there was probably at least one thing in there that you could relate to. You know what? I'm just gonna say what we're all thinking here. I think a lot of men get beaten down by this stigma that men are only in it for the sex. And if you want to claim that this is me just spewing my internal insecurities, that's fine. Maybe there's some truth to that even. But I'd like to think that us men are just better than that. I think a lot of men and women just approach relationships differently. And wouldn't it be so great if we were all on the same page all the time? Unfortunately, that's just not really an attainable goal. But I think South Park was onto something when they made proper condom use all those years ago. I think the creators saw a future where this stuff would get out of hand, and it's starting to get out of hand. I think in general, men would like women to understand them more, and I also think men need to take the initiative to also understand themselves better. That was certainly a video that I made. Out of anything that I've ever made, this one feels a little directionless, maybe? We didn't even circle back to South Park until the very end there. But, it feels right, in a way. Talking about the concept of sex isn't something that's very straightforward. There's no manual that perfectly describes how to go about it. But the very least I can do is try to open up a dialogue. As a young man, I'm personally concerned with my generation and future generations when it comes to sex. I think there's still a lot of communication issues we need to work out, and hopefully this video inspired at least one person to start that conversation. Or maybe not, I don't know.
Gay fish, yo. Motherfucking gay fish. I'm a fish, yo. Going on a gay fish. It's alright, girl. Making love to other gay fish.